and examples must be made. Kneel now, and I may spare your life. You cannot spare what you never gave me.
King Valerian stared at Elias with the calm expression of a man who had spent most of his life watching others fear him. His face showed no anger at first, no surprise either, only curiosity, and somehow that was worse. The king took a slow step forward while the guards tightened their grip on their weapons. "Who is this man?" Valerian asked softly. Captain Lucian lowered his head. "A farmer, your majesty." "A farmer," the king repeated. His eyes swept over Elias's torn clothes and dirt-covered hands. How disappointing. A few nervous chuckles escaped the soldiers, but nobody laughed for long. Valerian approached until only a few feet separated him from Elias. Up close, the king's presence felt suffocating, not because he was physically imposing, but because he carried the confidence of a man who believed the world existed beneath him. Still, Elias did not bow. The villagers watched in frozen terror. One wrong word could turn the entire field into a graveyard. The king studied him carefully. "You know who I am?" "Yes." "And yet you remain standing?" "Yes." Valerian tilted his head slightly. "Why?" Elias wiped blood from his mouth before answering. "Because a man should kneel before God, not another man." The field went silent again. Even the wind seemed afraid. Captain Lucian shut his eyes briefly, already imagining the execution that would follow. But King Valerian simply smiled, not warmly, not kindly, the smile of a man amused by something small and fragile. "You speak boldly for someone dressed like a beggar," Elias answered immediately. "And you wear a crown heavy enough to crush a kingdom." Several soldiers inhaled sharply. One guard whispered, "He's dead." The king's smile faded. Now the coldness beneath his calm expression began to show. Valerian walked in a slow circle around Elias, studying him the way merchants inspected damaged animals before purchase. "You people always fascinate me," the king said. "The poor suffer the most, yet you still cling to pride as though it feeds your stomach." Elias remained silent. Valerian stopped in front of him again. "Tell me, farmer, how many nights have you gone hungry?" Elias did not answer. "How many winters has this kingdom failed you?" Still silence. The king spread his arms dramatically. "And yet, despite everything, you still stand here pretending dignity matters." Elias finally spoke. "It matters more than fear." Something dangerous flashed across Valerian's eyes. The king stepped closer. "So you believe yourself fearless?" "No." "Then why refuse to bow?" Elias looked directly into the king's eyes. "Because men like you only rule when men like me kneel." The sentence struck harder than any blade. Several villagers lowered their heads deeper into the dirt, terrified to even witness the exchange. Captain Lucian watched carefully now, not because he expected Elias to survive, but because something strange was happening. The king was listening. Valerian had executed noblemen for lesser insults, yet this poor farmer still breathed. And the king looked interested. That was unusual, very unusual. Valerian turned away slowly and glanced across the dry fields surrounding the village. "Do you know why this kingdom obeys me?" he asked calmly. Elias said nothing. "Because people fear chaos more than cruelty," the king continued. "Without me, these lands would collapse into war." He pointed toward the villagers. "They bow because they understand survival." Elias followed the king's gaze. The villagers looked exhausted, thin, broken, afraid. Then Elias looked back at Valerian. "No," he said quietly. "They bow because they're terrified." For the first time, the king's patience cracked slightly, his jaw tightened. "And what would you know about ruling?" "Nothing." "Exactly." Valerian turned sharply toward the villagers. "Look at him," the king called loudly, "a starving farmer pretending wisdom." Nobody responded. Nobody dared. The king looked back at Elias. "You think standing makes you strong?" Elias answered softly. "No, but kneeling made us weak." The words landed like fire in dry grass. Captain Lucian noticed something alarming immediately. The villagers were listening differently now, not with fear, with attention. That alone was dangerous. The king noticed it too, and suddenly the amusement vanished from his face completely. Valerian stepped closer until he stood inches away from Elias. "When I was a child," the king said quietly, "my father taught me something important. Mercy creates rebellion." His voice became colder. "So I learned to rule without mercy." Elias held his gaze. "And are you proud of that?" The question lingered heavily in the air. For a brief second, something unreadable crossed Valerian's face. Then it disappeared. The king turned toward Captain Lucian. "Take him." Several villagers gasped softly. Soldiers grabbed Elias roughly, forcing his arms behind his back. Still, he refused to kneel. Valerian watched carefully. "Bring him to the capital." Lucian looked surprised. "Alive, Your Majesty?" The king smiled faintly. "Oh, yes." He glanced at Elias. "I want the entire kingdom to watch what happens to men who confuse stubbornness with courage." The soldiers chained Elias's wrists tightly. Tobin suddenly cried out from the crowd, "Please, Your Majesty." Every villager froze. Tobin immediately regretted speaking. The king slowly turned toward him. Tobin trembled violently in the dirt. He's just tired," Tobin stammered. "Please forgive him." Valerian stared down at the frightened farmer. "And who are you?" Tobin, Your Majesty." The king nodded slowly. "Tell me, Tobin, do you bow willingly?" Tobin swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Why?" Because you are our king." Valerian smiled slightly and gestured toward Elias. "You see, even your own people understand their place." Elias suddenly spoke. "No," he said calmly. "He understands fear." The king's expression hardened again. "Enough." Valerian climbed back into the carriage. Before the doors closed, he looked directly at Elias one final time. "You will kneel eventually." Elias answered without hesitation. "No." The carriage door slammed shut. Moments later, the royal escort began moving toward the
Father, where are they taking you?
Silence. Keep moving. To the castle. Be brave.
I will. I promise.
Hours later, Elias arrived at the capital of Arathor.
The city looked magnificent from a distance. Massive towers, golden domes, marble statues.
As the soldiers dragged Elias through the streets, people stopped to stare. Whispers spread rapidly. "That's him, the farmer, the man who refused to bow." An old woman crossed herself nervously. A young boy watched Elias with wide eyes. Unlike the others, the boy did not look afraid. He looked amazed. Captain Lucian noticed the reactions immediately, and he disliked them very much. He rode beside Elias and lowered his voice. By sunset, Elias was dragged into the throne hall. The chamber was enormous, lined with black pillars and golden fire bowls that cast flickering shadows across the walls. Giant statues of former kings towered over the room like silent judges. At the center stood the iron throne of Arathor, and seated upon it was King Valerian. The hall was crowded with nobles, generals, advisors, and royal servants, all watching, all curious. The chained farmer was forced onto the cold stone floor. Captain Lucian stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the prisoner." Valerian rested his chin against one hand lazily. Elias noticed something immediately. Everyone in the throne room avoided eye contact with the king. Even powerful men feared him. The king looked down at Elias. Has he bowed yet? "No, Your Majesty." Murmurs spread through the hall. Valerian sighed dramatically. How exhausting. A nobleman laughed nervously. Another whispered, "Execute him." But the king raised one finger, silencing the room instantly.
And examples must be made. Kneel now, and I may spare your life. You cannot spare what you never gave me.